Seahawks win 26-20. They improve to 1-0 on the season. Go over the scoring plays in the first quarter. Will Lutz makes a 35-yarder. Jason Myers also makes a field goal. His from 50 yards. If only you got extra points from the further field goal. 3-3 tie game at the end of one. Second quarter, Anthony Bradford called for holding in the end zone. That is a safety to make it 5-3 Denver. Will Lutz makes a 30-yard field goal to make it 8-3 Denver. Seahawks get their first touchdown of the year. Geno Smith, a 34-yard rush, makes it 9-8. Two-point conversion is no good, so it stays 9-8. Another safety happens. Zach Charbonnet can't get the ball out of the end zone for a loss of 1 yard. That makes it 10-9. And Will Lutz makes a 45-yard field goal just before the end of half to make it 13-9 Broncos. Third quarter is all Seahawks, and really the second half is all Seahawks. Kenneth Walker rushes for a 23-yard touchdown to give the Seahawks a 16-13 lead, and Jason Myers makes a 28-yard field goal, 19-13 at the end of three. Zach Charbonnet on a completely busted coverage, but we'll talk about that play. Geno Smith finds him for 30 yards for a touchdown to make it 26-13. Broncos do get a late touchdown to make it 26-20. So, yeah, I'm covering Seahawks games. It's something that I decided to do basically last week, and I wanted to save it as a surprise. Here we are. Surprise. I am covering Seahawks games. For those of you, if this is your first time at the channel, my name is Chris Crawford. I cover the NFL and MLB, mostly MLB, but quite a bit of NFL lately too, for NBC Sports / Roto World. I've covered both sports for a very long time. I've covered college football, maybe more than any other sport, but I've always been a big Seahawks fan. So how this is going to work, I'm just going to recap every single game, and we're going to do it similar to how we do Mile Y. So those, and Mile Y is staying. I don't have a different name for this thing, but it's going to be similar, to the baseball stuff. When they win, we'll talk about some negatives and then end with the positives. If they somehow lose a game, we will talk about the positives and then kind of end with the negatives. That's how we go. Just a couple of heads up things. Number one, I don't have an edit button. You will hear ums. You will see stats that are incorrect. I don't have the ability to, I could get the ability, but I'm not going to. I think it's part of the charm of the channel is that you will see the mistakes. Number two, I think there might be some people who say, hey, Chris, stay in your lane, bruh, and only cover the sport that we know you from. And I just want to tell you, I know I feel confident doing this. I feel very confident. I feel confident talking about a sport that I cover for one of the largest companies in the world on a channel. You may disagree with what I say. Many of you disagree with what I say for Mile Y. But the stick to baseball stuff will irk me. So please don't be that person. If you disagree with the take, let me know. Let me know why. More than happy to. I take pride in being a person who goes in the comments and checks out everything. So yeah, I'm excited and I appreciate all feedback because this is first time doing this. So we'll see how it goes. So let us start with those negatives. The first half was garbage. I know they end up getting 9 points, but man, they did not look good, especially offensively. Defense, I think, actually played well. In fact, probably the biggest negative that you could take from this game is Bo Nix looked horrendous throughout the game. A couple of decent throws, but for the most part, he looked overmatched. And then we'll talk about why in a second, too. But the offense really struggled. And, that very first series, you get a 7-yard sack, right around that number anyway. And then Geno Smith throws up I don't know what he was doing. He clearly was a little panicked, and he throws the ball up into the middle of the field, and it's intercepted. And, great job by the defense to just hold him to 3 from that. And while that was the only interception Geno threw in that first half and throughout the rest of the game, and the completion percentage was decent, they just weren't able to get the ball downfield at all. And I know Ryan Grubb wanted to get the ball downfield. Heck, you could tell based on the first 2 plays that he was looking to take some shots. They had to change the game plan. And again, we'll talk about the positive of that in the second half. But that first half and the interior of the offensive line in particular really struggled over those first 30 minutes. They just had no answers for those guys. And this is not an elite defensive line, in my humble estimation, for the Broncos. It's not the worst, but man, they could not handle the interior rush. Anthony Bradford really struggled. And, that holding play, it's kind of inexcusable. You cannot make a mistake like that, especially when you look at it. It didn't look like that guy was going to get to Geno, but you can't reach out like that. And you have to wonder if Christian Haynes will get a deeper look this week. Now, I thought Bradford played okay in the second half, and Connor Williams, I thought, got stronger, but all three of the interior linemen just really didn't have a very good time in that first half. And Geno, I don't think he was bad. He missed on a couple of throws, and there were a couple of throws that were a little behind, but also made some really nice back shoulder throws. We'll talk about how good he was in the second half again. I promise I won't always remind you that we're going to talk about positives. It's just my natural nature. You guys are probably used to it who have been watching my Mariner recaps. By the way, I do recap every single Mariner game, and I'd appreciate you hitting like and subscribe so you can watch that stuff too. Totally understand if you're not interested in the Mariners. Also totally understand if you're not interested in the Seahawks, by the way. If you have no interest in watching these Seahawk videos, not a big deal. I do not hold it personally. Sure appreciate those who do, but I don't hold it personally. But I thought that the interior of the offensive line was pretty bad. And it's hard to be too harsh on Geno because of the fact that he wasn't like scrambling for his life, but he had to maneuver in the pocket a lot, because of how bad those guys were. And it really hurt them in the run game in the first half as well. I think that's really the only negative, was how bad they looked offensively over those first 30 minutes. I can't really think of anything else to do other than to thank Simply Seattle. Yes, of course, they're going to be sponsoring these as well. They just don't know it yet. Simply Seattle provides the very best in Seattle sports gear. Awesome stuff for the Mariners, the Seahawks, the Kraken, the Storm, the Sounders, Huskies, Cougars. You can find it all at simplyseattle.com. Use code MOLLYWOP15, MOLLYWHOP15. Amazing that I almost forgot my own code there. I can tell you what a long day this has been for me, but use that code, saves 15% off your order, MOLLYWHOP15. You'll find a link in the description. They're an awesome company. They have great stuff. See how beautiful this Ken Griffey Jr. hat is? I got that from Simply Seattle, and I saved 15% off because I used code MOLLYWOP15. Super appreciate them, and yeah, thank you, Simply Seattle. Positives. Kenneth Walker was phenomenal, especially in the second half. Ends up with 20 carries for 103 yards with the touchdown. And, he was fighting for those yards in the first half. I think he had 19 yards in the first half, and then the rest coming in the second, in particular, the third quarter. He did leave with like what they called a muscle thing, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be a serious injury. They need him. They need him bad. And all due respect to Zach Charbonnet, who scores the touchdown, and we'll talk about the touchdown. But Kenneth Walker is a different animal right now. Boy, I don't know outside of, they've actually had a few of these guys. Marshawn was like this. Chris Carson was. There are some running backs who just absolutely hate to be tackled. And Kenneth Walker, while I'm not saying that he doesn't like contact, in fact, he can break tackles with the best of them. Maybe not the best of them, but he could break a lot of tackles. You can tell he takes being tackled personally. And there were some runs, even some negative yardage runs, where he was just not going to get down. And, the same could be said for Chris Carson. The same could obviously be said by that Marshawn Lynch. Was that how you pronounce that? Yeah. But you can tell he takes it personally. But I thought he did such a nice job of finding the creases in the second half today. And credit to Ryan Grubb in his first game, making that adjustment to being run heavy. In part, it was a necessity because they just weren't going to be able to get the ball downfield today. But in part two, be from recognizing schemes. And this is something, look, I'm a huge Husky fan, and I wish I could do Husky recaps. It's just Saturdays are way too busy for me with NBC Sports, maybe next year. But one of the things I was always impressed with Grubb was the adjustments that he made. The ability to, if things weren't going well, or if one facet of the game wasn't going well, the ability to make that adjustment. Now, he wasn't able to do that really with the passing game today, but I don't think that's on Grubb. I think that's more just on the fact that because the interior just wasn't going to get the job done. And also, George Fant, the backup tackle, has to leave this game with a knee injury, and Forsyth takes over and does okay. Could have been a lot worse, your third string tackle. But because of those issues, you weren't going to be able to throw the long ball today. But he was able to get some back shoulder connections, and he was also able to get the short passing game working pretty well in the second half too. But most importantly, he makes the adjustment to get Walker the ball in areas that he has been extremely successful with. And the patience that he showed and the ability to find those creases was very impressive from Walker. That touchdown play to, Zach Charbonnet, again, no edit button. I wish I could just go back and erase that quiet little pause, but I can't. I could, but I won't. That was a well-designed play too. It was a busted coverage for sure, but something that the Broncos had seen, that look, and then you slip out Charbonnet in the backfield, you take advantage of it, and Charbonnet shows his athleticism and makes the play. I mean, a lot of running backs would have scored there. I was never a huge fan of the Charbonnet pick. I wasn't a huge fan of the Kenneth Walker pick. I don't like taking running backs in the second round. There are just so many guys that you can get later in drafts, but I think they're a very good 1-2 combination. Very strong 1-2 combination. Charbonnet couldn't find anything really on the ground, but makes that big play to basically put that game away, because there was no way Denver was getting 26 points today. Zero shot, in part because the defense was phenomenal. But I want to end with the defense. The receivers, nobody has a huge day except Tyler Lockett, I think, especially for the fact that he was questionable coming into this game. I thought played a fantastic game. Those back shoulder connections with Geno, you can tell that those two have done that an awful lot in practice and in games. The timing was excellent. And then that massive one-handed catch to cement the win. Tyler Lockett doesn't get nearly enough credit for how good he's been as a Seattle Seahawk. And it's funny because a lot of people like to talk to me about the disaster of the Jimmy Graham trade. Oh, you gave up a first-round pick and Max Unger. Well, yeah, they did. And, it's fair to say the Seahawks have struggled at the center position. And we talked about how Connor Williams didn't look very good in that first half. And it's also fair to say that, they gave up a first-round pick for a tight end who was never elite, right? But a lot of people forget that the Seahawks got a third-round pick in that trade. And do you know who they used to pick that? Yeah, of course. My great point ruined because I can't talk. Do you know who that third-round pick was used on? Yeah, it'd be weird if it wasn't. Tyler Lockett. I'll take Tyler Lockett over what they gave up pretty easily. All due respect to Max Unger, I think the Seahawks won that trade. It's just people forget. And of course, you could argue that maybe the Seahawks could have traded up in the third round to get him, blah, 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 blah. But everybody forgets that Tyler Lockett was in the Jimmy Graham trade, technically. And, I will point out, too, that John Schneider was quick to point out we also got a third-round pick in this trade when people were talking about how much they had given up for a tight end. It's not like Jimmy Graham was bad. Anyway, Tyler Lockett, really good player. Metcalf and JSN just couldn't find anything going. Some credit there to Patrick Surtain, too, who was just an absolute beast. I might argue he was the second-best cornerback today, but we'll get there. Just couldn't get loose. Those two combined for 6 targets, 5 catches, but a long gain of 12 between the two. They're going to have to be better. Now, by better, I don't think they played poor games. I could never tell. I would need the all-22, and I will never have the all-22. But they're going to need more productive games from those guys. The 6 for 77, you'll take that from Lockett for sure. But you need your outside guys in Metcalf and JSN to play better games. Have more productive games. See, I'm correcting myself as I go. Noah Fant not really involved. We could have mentioned that in the negative section, but they did get him an end zone target, but unfortunately doesn't work out. I thought the offense played fine today. I would probably give them a B-. I would give them a D+ for the first half and probably a B+ for the second half, mainly because I liked the adjustments they made against that Denver defense. And speaking of defense, So many Seahawks had such good games today. Julian Love gets that interception, a massive interception, too. It's one of the few times that the Broncos were driving. Shows off, shows he's well worth that contract. Also had 12 tackles today. Julian Love is such an underrated football player. Now, the Seahawks obviously know how good he is, but Julian Love is so underrated in the secondary. And he's underrated because the other two guys in the secondary that everyone talks about, your quarterbacks, Devin Witherspoon and Reek Willen, are amazing. And they both were phenomenal today. You know, as bad as Bo Nix was, you have to say, hey, he's going to face much more secondaries in the coming weeks. Because man, that 1-2 punch competes with any in football, in my personal opinion. Devin Witherspoon is just a star. And he should have had another pick today, or should have had a pick today, another added to his career total. But you saw him make the impact with the blitz. I thought Adams Archuleta, who, by the way, I think is a terrific play-by-play or color commentary guy. The fact that he yelled, "Oh no," before the interception, by Reek Willen, that was so amazing. But you saw the impact. But Archuleta pointed out that on that blitz, he needs to go for the inside. I believe it's the inside shoulder is what he said, but made a good point. And I didn't make a good point in bringing up the point, but it was a very nice blitz. And that's what he can do. Not only is he one of the best cover corners already in the NFL, he can make that impact with the blitz. He's got that Jamal Adams in him without having that Jamal Adams in him. If you know, you know. Reek Willen was fantastic again. I thought Reek Willen actually had a much better second year than a lot of people give him credit for. Yeah, he got beat some. He was also targeted just so much that you were going to see catches against him. You know, not as good as his rookie year, but enough flashes to suggest that he's a well above average corner. In fact, well above average is probably understating it. He's a really good player, and I think he's going to have a big year. Now, he's going to get targeted a lot again because teams are not going to go after Witherspoon, but I think he's going to do the job and then some. I thought the linebackers today, and this was one of the biggest question marks I had from the team, were outstanding today too. Tyrell Dodson was such a steal this offseason. Like, I don't understand why there wasn't more interest in that dude. I understand it from the point of your justification is that he just didn't get as much snaps as some of those guys. But analytically, this was one of the best linebackers in football last year. And he played a terrific game today. Jerome Baker played a great game today, looked healthy. Boye Malfe, he's listed right above. Sorry about that. And Derek Hall, both getting sacks. The pass rush could have been a little bit better, especially from the interior, although Leonard Williams played an awesome game today as well from the interior. Byron Murphy, have to look at the film a little bit to see how much more of an impact that he made. But first game, you know, I don't remember them calling his name very often. But the run defense was good today, and the pass defense was elite. Helped by an incompetent quarterback, if we're just being completely honest. Bo Nix was awful. But I thought this was encouraging, especially what I saw from them in the second half. First half, offensively particular, was bad. And there was a couple of defensive gaffes, you know, they gashed him a little bit on a couple of runs. As a Notre Dame fan, I was sad to see Audric Estime fumble on his very first attempt. You know, there was some of that. There was none of that in the second half, though. They just played such a complete game. Oh, the one other negative that I'd point out is some special teams gaffes. You know, one of them, I'm not sure if D. Williams should have fielded that ball or not, the one that set up the safety. It was a terrific play by Denver, but you can't fumble. You can't fumble. Without that fumble, Denver's only scoring 17 today. And really, that touchdown, I wouldn't call it garbage time. The game I felt like was in hand. That probably makes sense. If it doesn't, that's okay. So you get the win. You improve to 1-0. And now you take on the Patriots next week, who are coming off a win over the Broncos, a shorthanded Broncos, to be sure. And the game is in New England. I think this might be a low-scoring one. I was impressed. I got to watch a lot of that game while covering baseball and football for NBC today. I work so much. The Sundays are a particularly tough day, but this is kind of a nice change of pace. But, they looked good in Gerard Mayo's coaching debut, especially defensively. Well, only defensively. The offense didn't do a whole heck of a lot. I think you'll see another low-scoring one. But you get the chance to face off against Jacoby Brissett and a really good chance to go to 2-0. And I think you have to, if you're talking about this team being a legitimate playoff contender. And more than that, maybe winning a game or two in the playoffs as well. Because the schedule gets pretty tough after that. Miami, it didn't look great. Detroit, who I think is one of the best teams in football, the Giants. And then San Francisco. That's tough. That's a pretty tough little stretch there. If you could be 4-2 after those 6 games, oh, you're looking great. You're looking great. And you only have to go 3-2 now because you get the first win against a Denver team that did look terrible. There's no way of getting around that, particularly on offense, but you still get the W and a great chance to go to 2-0 next week. I'd appreciate you hitting like. I'd appreciate you hitting subscribe. I'm now going to record the Seattle Mariner game right now. And then I have to record a podcast for NBC. Interesting life. Really good win. Really fun win. And congrats to Mike McDonald, who I should have talked about more. I thought he did a fantastic job in his first game. I love the adjustments that Grubb made. Had no issues with the play calling. Everything's good.